Do you want to know the real reason why Big Bend National Park, which covers over 800,000 acres, has only 12 forest rangers, when I think it should have over 50? Contrary to what you might think, it's not because of budget cuts. It's because those who do this job can only last 6 months at most. It's not because the job is too difficult, although patrolling the Chihuahuan Desert in 47-degree heat looking for drug smugglers isn't exactly easy. The real reason they leave is the lost hours. It's because of what happens in the Santa Elena Canyon after nightfall. Anyone who experiences it once can never look at the desert the same way again. My name is Ranger Maria Gonzalez. I've been with Texas Parks and Wildlife for 15 years, the last 8 at Big Bend. I'm one of the few who stayed after experiencing what we don't put in the official reports, what we mark as equipment malfunction or heat exhaustion hallucination. If you're watching this from Texas, especially if you're planning to visit Big Bend, pay attention. That missing hiker report you heard about, the one where they said the person got lost and died of dehydration, sometimes that's true, but sometimes they come back, changed, and sometimes they come back 20 years younger or older than when they left, with no memory of what happened during their missing hours. Drop a comment. Have you ever lost time in the desert? Woke up somewhere you don't remember going? You're not alone. And you're not crazy. The desert takes people sometimes. And sometimes, if you're very lucky or very unlucky, it gives them back. The rule was simple. Never enter Santa Elena Canyon after sunset. It wasn't written in any official park documentation, wasn't part of the ranger training manual, but every ranger who'd been at Big Bend for more than a year knew it. The senior rangers would tell you during your first week, usually over beers at the Starlight Theater in Terlingua, the ghost town just outside the park boundaries. Mija, Ranger Tom Delgado, had told me 8 years ago, using the affectionate Spanish term even though he was Irish-German from Dallas, there are places in this park where the rules of reality get thin. Santa Elena Canyon is one of them. The Mexicans know it, the Comanche knew it before them, and whatever lived here before humans knew it too. After dark, that canyon belongs to something else. I'd laughed it off at first. Desert people were always superstitious, mixing Native American legends with Mexican folklore and good old-fashioned Texas tall tales. But then I'd had my first experience with the missing hours, and I understood why the rule existed. It was March 15th, 2019, when everything changed. The desert was in bloom, one of those rare springs when enough rain had fallen to wake up the dormant seeds. The entire park was carpeted with bluebonnets, Mexican gold poppies, and Big Bend bluebells. It was the kind of beauty that made you forget the desert was actually trying to kill you every second of every day. I was stationed at Panther Junction, the main visitor center and park headquarters. My shift started at 6 a.m., patrolling the Rio Grande Village area, checking on campers, making sure nobody was doing anything stupid, like trying to swim across the Rio Grande. The river was running higher than usual thanks to snowmelt in the Colorado mountains, and every year some tourists thought they could wade across to Mexico for a photo op. Every year, some of them drowned. The call came in at 4:47 p.m. A family of 4, the Hendersons from Austin, hadn't returned from their morning hike into Santa Elena Canyon. They'd registered at the trailhead at 9 a.m., planning a simple out and back to see where the Rio Grande had carved a 1,500-foot-deep gash between Texas and Mexico. It was a 5-mile round trip, should have taken them 4 hours maximum. They'd been gone for almost 8. Their car's still at the trailhead, dispatch reported. Visitor who just came back said they didn't see anyone on the trail. I knew that trail like the back of my hand. It was one of the most popular in the park, following the Rio Grande into the mouth of the canyon before dead-ending at a massive boulder fall. There were no side trails, No way to get lost unless you deliberately climbed up the canyon walls or tried to swim the river. Neither option usually ended well. "I'll check it out," I radioed back, already heading for my truck. The drive from Panther Junction to Santa Elena took about an hour on a good day, but I made it in 45 minutes. The sun was already low on the horizon, painting the limestone walls of the canyon orange and red. I had maybe an hour of daylight left. The Henderson's blue Honda Odyssey was the only vehicle in the parking area. I checked inside, water bottles in the cup holders, phone charger plugged in, a kid's Nintendo Switch on the back seat. They'd planned to come back. I geared up quickly. Backpack with first aid kit, extra water, emergency blankets, flares, radio, and my Glock 9mm. The gun was for mountain lions and bears, officially. Unofficially, it was for the drug runners who sometimes used the remote canyons to move product. And if you believed the old-timers, it was for things that guns couldn't actually stop, but might at least slow down. The trail into Santa Elena Canyon started easy enough, winding through desert scrub and salt cedar along the riverbank. The canyon walls rose gradually at first. Then, suddenly, you were between two massive limestone cliffs that blocked out most of the sky. The temperature dropped 15 degrees instantly, and the sound changed. The desert's ambient noise replaced by the echo of the river and your own footsteps. I called out as I hiked, "Park Ranger, Henderson family. Can anyone hear me?" My voice echoed off the canyon walls, distorting until it didn't sound human anymore. That was normal. The acoustics in Santa Elena were weird. Something about the shape of the canyon and the density of the rock. Scientists had explanations for it. But when you were alone in there as the sun was setting, those explanations didn't make you feel any better. I found the first sign of the Hendersons about a mile in. A child's sneaker, size 3, pink with unicorns on it. It was sitting in the middle of the trail, perfectly placed like someone had set it there deliberately. No sign of struggle, no other disturbance. Just a shoe. I photographed it and kept going. The canyon was getting narrower, the walls closing in. The sunlight was completely gone now, replaced by a deep blue twilight that made everything look underwater. I switched on my flashlight, and that's when I saw the second shoe. Same size, same style, placed exactly in the middle of the trail about 50 yards from the first. "Madison? Tyler? Mr. and Mrs. Henderson?" I called out again. The echo came back wrong, like it was in a language I didn't understand. Then I heard it. Laughter. A child's laughter coming from ahead in the canyon, but also from behind me, and from above. The same laugh at the same time from multiple directions. I drew my weapon, keeping it at low ready. "This is Park Ranger Gonzalez. If someone's out there, you need to respond." The laughter stopped instantly, cut off like someone had thrown a switch. The silence that followed was complete. No river sound, no wind, no insects. Nothing. It was like the canyon was holding its breath. I kept moving forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. The trail curved around a massive boulder, and there they were. The Henderson family. All 4 of them standing in a perfect line across the trail, facing me. The parents on the outside, the 2 kids in the middle. They were smiling, but their eyes were closed. "Mr. Henderson, are you folks all right?" They didn't respond, didn't move. I stepped closer, and that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. They were breathing in perfect unison. Every inhale, every exhale synchronized like they were one organism with 4 bodies. "Hey!" I said sharply, trying to break whatever trance they were in. "I need you to open your eyes and talk to me." They opened their eyes at exactly the same moment. But their eyes were wrong. The irises were too large, taking up almost the entire visible eye, and they were reflecting light like a nocturnal animal's, like a deer in headlights, except deer don't smile like that. "We've been waiting for you, Ranger Gonzalez," they said. All four of them speaking in perfect unison with the same inflection, the same tone, like a choir of one voice. "We need to get you out of here," I said, trying to maintain authority despite the fear crawling up my spine. "It's getting dark." "Dark," they repeated, still in that horrible unison. Yes, that's when the door opens, when the canyon remembers what it really is, when the missing hours begin. The canyon wall to my right began to shimmer, like heat waves off hot asphalt, except the temperature had dropped to near freezing. Through the shimmer, I could see another canyon identical to this one but wrong. The river was flowing uphill. The rocks were different colors, purples and greens that didn't exist in nature. And there were things moving in that other canyon, tall figures that walked wrong, like they had too many joints, or not enough. "You need to come with us," the Hendersons said, "through the door. To the place where time runs differently, where the Spanish gold seekers went, where the Comanche vision seekers went, where everyone who breaks the rule eventually goes." "No," I said firmly, raising my weapon. "We're leaving. Now." They laughed again, that same child's laughter but from four mouths. "You can't shoot us, Ranger. We're not really here. We're already through the door. These are just echoes, invitations. The real us is learning so much, seeing so much, becoming so much more." The shimmer was spreading, covering more of the canyon wall. Through it, I could see other people. Hikers in modern gear, Spanish conquistadors in armor, Native Americans in traditional dress, all walking through that wrong canyon, all moving with that same synchronized gait. 63 people have gone through the door since the park was established," the Hendersons continued. "Most come back. Eventually, some come back the next day having aged 20 years. Some come back 20 years later not having aged a day. Time doesn't work the same way in the between place." "What do you want?" I asked. "We want you to know the truth, to warn others, to maintain the rule. But also, we want you to understand that the door is getting wider. The missing hours are becoming missing days. Soon, missing weeks. The between place is growing stronger, pushing into your world." The shimmer suddenly collapsed, and the Hendersons collapsed with it, falling to the ground like marionettes with cut strings. I rushed to them, checking pulses. They were alive, unconscious, but breathing normally. Their eyes, when I lifted their eyelids, were normal human eyes again. I radioed for emergency evacuation, and within an hour, a helicopter was lifting the family out. They woke up in the hospital with no memory of the hike, claiming their last memory was eating breakfast at their campsite. The doctors diagnosed it as mass heat exhaustion leading to shared delirium. The Park Service filed it as a successful rescue of confused hikers. But I knew the truth, and when I went back to the canyon the next day to retrieve any gear they might have left, I found something that confirmed it. Carved into a rock near where I'd found them, in Spanish that looked centuries old but was clearly fresh, were the words, "El tiempo no es un río, es una telaraña, y el cañón es donde los hilos se cruzan." Time is not a river, it's a web, and the canyon is where the threads cross. That was my introduction to the real Big Bend, the one that exists beneath the tourist destination, the one where the desert remembers everything that's ever walked across it, where the canyons are doors to places that shouldn't exist, and where the missing hours are just the beginning of what can be lost. The rule exists for a reason. Never enter Santa Elena Canyon after dark. Because the door opens, and once you've seen what's on the other side, you can never really come back. Part of you stays there, in the between place, walking with all the others who broke the rule, And the worst part? The door is getting wider. The rules are breaking down, and I don't think we have much time before the between place stops waiting for people to come to it and starts coming for us. After the Henderson incident, I started keeping my own records. Not official Park Service documentation. Those had to follow protocols, use approved terminology, avoid anything that might scare off tourists or invite lawsuits. My records were different. They were the truth. I interviewed every ranger who'd been at Big Bend for more than a year, getting them drunk enough at the Starlight Theater to tell me their real experiences. What I learned painted a picture of something that had been happening for much longer than anyone wanted to admit. Tom Delgado, the ranger who'd first warned me about Santa Elena, finally told me his story after his fourth Dos Equis. It was 2009, his second year at the park. A geology PhD student from UT Austin had gone into the canyon to study the limestone formations. She came back 3 days later, except according to her equipment, she'd only been gone 3 hours. Her GPS showed she'd never left the trail. Her camera had 3 hours of photos showing rock formations that didn't exist in our canyon. Formations with crystalline structures that one geologist later said looked more like deep ocean volcanic vents than anything that should be in a desert canyon. The weird part, Tom said, staring at his beer, was that she'd aged. When she went in, she looked maybe 25. When she came out, she had gray streaks in her hair and crow's feet around her eyes. The doctors said it was impossible, that extreme stress could cause premature graying, but not actual aging. But I saw her before and after. She'd aged at least 10 years in 3 hours. Ranger Patricia Williams, who'd transferred from Guadalupe Mountains National Park, had her own stories. She'd been on night patrol in 2015 when she saw lights in Santa Elena Canyon. Not flashlights or headlamps, but a golden glow like fire. Except fire that cast shadows in the wrong directions. I went to investigate, she told me, thinking maybe it was kids camping illegally. But when I got to the canyon mouth, the light was coming from inside the rock itself. Like the limestone was translucent and something was glowing behind it. And I could hear singing, not in English or Spanish, but something older. It sounded like dozens of voices, all harmonizing in frequencies that made my teeth ache. She'd called for backup, but by the time Tom arrived, the lights were gone. The only evidence was a section of canyon wall that was warm to the touch, almost hot, in the middle of a January night when the temperature was near freezing. But the most disturbing testimony came from Marcus Rodriguez, a ranger who'd quit in 2017 but still lived in Terlingua. I found him working as a river guide, taking tourists on raft trips down the Rio Grande. He was reluctant to talk at first, but when I mentioned the Hendersons and the synchronized breathing, his face went pale. "You've seen them," he said. It wasn't a question. The Hollow People. We were sitting on his porch looking out at the Chisos Mountains as the sun set. He poured himself a generous amount of mezcal before continuing. Summer of 2016, we had a family go missing, the Nguyen's from Houston. 2 parents, 3 kids, grandmother. They'd gone into Santa Elena around noon, should have been back by 4. When they didn't return by sunset, I went in after them. Found them about 2 miles into the canyon, just standing there, facing the wall. All 6 of them, in a perfect line, breathing together just like you described. He took a long drink. But here's what you probably haven't seen yet. I watched them for maybe 5 minutes, trying to figure out what to do. And then they walked into the wall, not through a cave or a crack, into solid rock. Their bodies just merged with the limestone like it was water. I could see their outlines in the rock for a few seconds, pressing against it from the inside, and then they were gone. "What happened to them?" I asked. They came back the next morning, walking out of the canyon like nothing had happened. said they'd gotten tired and decided to rest in some shade. No memory of me finding them, no memory of walking into solid rock. But the youngest kid, a boy about 7, he kept drawing pictures afterward. His parents brought him to the visitor center because the drawings were disturbing them. Pictures of a city made of glass under the desert, where people with too many arms lived, where the sun never set but was always the wrong color. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me photos he'd taken of the kids' drawings. They were crude, done in crayon, but something about them made my skin crawl. The proportions were all wrong. The architecture didn't follow human logic, and the figures in them, they looked like people who'd been stretched and compressed and folded through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The family left the next day, Marcus continued, but I kept tabs on them. The kid, Timothy Nguyen, he's in a psychiatric facility now. Won't stop talking about the glass city, about how we're all just shadows of the real people who live under the desert. Says the missing hours are when we get to be real, when we get to go home. I documented everything, cross-referencing dates with park records. There was a pattern. The incidents clustered around certain times. The spring and fall equinoxes, the summer solstice, and, oddly, December 12th, the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The Spanish missionaries who'd first explored this area had noted the same dates as Días del Diablo, Devil Days, when the indigenous peoples would avoid certain areas of the desert. I also found correlations with missing persons reports going back to when Big Bend became a national park in 1944. But the reports went back further in the local records. The Texas Rangers, the law enforcement kind, not park rangers, had files from the 1890s talking about entire Mexican villages near what's now Santa Elena Canyon being found empty. Their populations vanished overnight. The buildings were intact, food still on tables, but every person gone. One report from 1897, written by a ranger named Samuel Cross, was particularly disturbing. Found the village of Santa Elena abandoned on December 13th. All 43 residents missing. Strange markings on the canyon walls that hurt to look upon. Horses won't go near the canyon mouth. Mexican guide says the people were taken by Los Antiguos, the ancient ones. He refuses to elaborate and has fled back across the river. I was building a timeline, trying to understand the pattern, when I got a call that changed everything. It was 2 a.m. on March 21st, 2019, the spring equinox. A couple camping at the Cottonwood campground near Santa Elena had reported strange lights and sounds coming from the canyon. Not just lights, the terrified camper told dispatch. People, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, walking into the canyon, but they're dressed wrong. Some look like cowboys, some like Spanish soldiers, some in clothes I don't recognize. And they're all walking in step, like an army. Please, send someone. I was the closest ranger on duty. As I drove through the desert night, I could see the lights from miles away. That golden glow Patricia had described, but stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The radio started picking up interference. Voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. Some that might have been English, but from different time periods. "Turn back, stranger. This ain't your fight," one voice said, crackling with static. The accent was pure 1880s Texas. "La puerta está abierta," another voice said. "Los antiguos están despertando." The door is open. The ancient ones are waking. When I reached the canyon overlook, I saw them. A procession of people stretching from the campground to the canyon mouth, all walking in perfect synchronization. They were from different eras. I saw Mexican revolutionaries from the 1910s, Buffalo Soldiers from the 1880s, Spanish conquistadors, Comanche warriors, modern hikers, park rangers in uniforms from the 1950s, all moving together, all with that same blank expression the Hendersons had worn. Among them, I recognized faces from missing person reports. The Hendersons were there, even though they were supposedly in an Austin hospital. The Nguyens, who should have been in Houston. Dozens of others I'd seen in files, all walking into Santa Elena Canyon as it glowed with that impossible light. I called for backup, but my radio was dead. My cell phone showed no signal. I was alone, watching what looked like every person who'd ever gone missing in Big Bend returning for some kind of gathering. And at the head of the procession was a figure that made me reach for my weapon instinctively. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, wearing what looked like a park ranger uniform, but from no era I recognized. The badges and patches were wrong, showing symbols instead of words, geometry that hurt to follow with your eyes. Its face was human-shaped, but the features kept shifting, like it couldn't decide which missing person to look like. It turned to look directly at me, though I was a quarter-mile away in the darkness, and smiled with too many teeth. "Ranger Gonzalez." Its voice carried impossibly across the distance, clear as if it was standing next to me. "You've been documenting us. Good. Someone needs to remember. Someone needs to warn them about what's coming." "What are you?" I shouted back, though I doubted my voice would carry. "We are the staff," it replied, and I realized it could hear me perfectly. "The rangers of the true park, the one that exists beneath and between." Every national park has its shadows, its places where reality thins. But Big Bend is special. It's where they all connect, a hub, a headquarters, you might say. The missing people are not missing. They're recruited, trained, prepared. Your reality is just one of many, Ranger Gonzalez. And it's bleeding into the others. The barriers are breaking down. Soon, there won't be your Big Bend and our Big Bend. There will just be Big Bend, all versions existing simultaneously. The procession had reached the canyon mouth. One by one, they walked into the glowing limestone and vanished. The Hendersons, the Nguyens, historical figures who'd been dead for centuries, all disappearing into solid rock. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because someone needs to maintain the rules during the transition," the tall figure said. "Someone who exists in both worlds, but belongs fully to neither. You've been into the canyon after dark. You've seen the between place. Part of you is already with us, whether you know it or not." It was the last to enter the canyon. As it walked into the stone, it turned back one more time. "Check your watch, Ranger Gonzalez. Check the date. Time isn't what you think it is." I looked at my watch. It read 2:47 a.m., March 21st. But my phone, when I checked it, showed 5:13 a.m., March 22nd. My patrol vehicle's clock showed 11:26 p.m., March 20th. Every timepiece I had showed a different time, a different date. The glow faded from the canyon, leaving only darkness and the normal sounds of the desert night. When backup finally arrived, 15 minutes later, according to them, 3 hours later, according to my watch, they found me sitting on the hood of my truck, staring at Santa Elena Canyon and trying to figure out which timeline I was actually in. The official report stated that I'd observed unusual atmospheric phenomena, possibly related to temperature inversions and mineral phosphorescence in the canyon walls. The campers who'd called it in were recorded as having experienced a shared hallucination brought on by dehydration and unfamiliarity with the desert environment. But I knew the truth. The missing hours weren't just about time being lost. They were about time being exchanged, shuffled between different versions of reality. Every person who'd ever disappeared in Big Bend was still here, just in a different iteration of the park, working as rangers for something that had been here long before the Park Service, long before humans, maybe long before Earth itself. And the worst part, the tall figure was right. Part of me was with them. Sometimes, when I patrolled at night, I'd see my own reflection in the truck window and there would be two of me, one in my regular uniform and one in that strange uniform with the symbol patches, both existing simultaneously. The transition was coming. The only question was whether we'd be ready for it, or whether we'd all just become more missing people, more hollow people, more recruiters for the true park that exists beneath the one we know. After the equinox incident, I couldn't leave it alone. Every off-duty hour was spent researching, documenting, trying to understand what was happening in Big Bend. I reached out to other parks, carefully asking if they'd experienced anything similar. Most rangers thought I was crazy, but a few, from Yosemite, Yellowstone, the Everglades, admitted they had their own stories, their own rules, their own missing hours. But none of them had anything like Santa Elena Canyon. It was Marcus Rodriguez, the former ranger turned river guide, who gave me the lead that changed everything. He called me one night in April, drunk and rambling about something he'd never told anyone. "Maria, you need to look into Dr. Elizabeth Cray," he slurred. "University of Texas, 1973. She was studying the geological anomalies in Santa Elena before the Park Service shut her down. But she didn't stop. She went underground, literally. There's a reason the old mining tunnels near Terlingua are off limits." Dr. Elizabeth Cray was hard to track down. She'd been dismissed from UT Austin in 1974 for pursuing research outside acceptable academic parameters. But she was still alive, 89 years old, living in a trailer on the outskirts of Study Butte, the almost ghost town next to Terlingua. The locals called her La Bruja Loca, the crazy witch, but they also left offerings at her door and never went near her property after dark. I found her on a scorching May afternoon, sitting in the shade of a ramada made from ocotillo branches and canvas. She was thin as a desert plant, skin like leather, but her eyes were sharp as obsidian. She looked at me and smiled, showing teeth too white and perfect for someone her age. "Ranger Gonzalez," she said before I could introduce myself. "I've been expecting you for about 6 years now. You're late." "How did you know your name? Know you'd come?" "My dear, when you've spent as much time in the between place as I have, linear time becomes more of a suggestion than a rule. I've already had this conversation with you multiple times, in different timelines. This is the version where you're ready to listen." She invited me into her trailer, which was larger inside than it should have been. The walls were covered with maps, equations, photographs of canyon formations that didn't exist in our reality. In the center was a scale model of Big Bend, but it showed layers. Our park on top, and beneath it, dozens of other versions, all slightly different. "The Chisos Mountains are the key," she said, pointing to the mountain range in the center of the park. "They're not really mountains, they're a projection, a three-dimensional shadow of something that exists in higher dimensions. Santa Elena Canyon is where that projection intersects with our reality most strongly." She pulled out a journal, its pages filled with observations dating back to the 1960s. "I first came here as a graduate student, studying the unusual mineral compositions in the canyon walls. The limestone there contains isotopes that shouldn't exist on Earth, elements that our periodic table says are impossible. But they're there, woven into the rock itself." "What are they?" "Evidence," she said simply. "Evidence that our reality is just one layer of many. The Spanish called this place El Despoblado, the uninhabited land. But it wasn't uninhabited. It was inhabited by things that existed in frequencies we couldn't perceive. Until now." She showed me photographs from her illegal expeditions into the sealed mining tunnels. The images showed cave paintings, but not like any Native American art I'd seen. These depicted figures with impossible anatomies, cities that existed in too many dimensions, and stars arranged in constellations that didn't match our sky. The Comanche avoided this area, Dr. Cray explained. Their oral histories talk about the people who walk between, beings that could step from one world to another. They made a treaty with them, agreeing to stay away from certain places in exchange for safe passage through the desert. When the Spanish came, they didn't know about the treaty. They built missions in the wrong places, dug mines in forbidden ground. What happened to them? The same thing that's happening now. They were recruited, converted, absorbed. The between place doesn't destroy. It incorporates. Every person who's ever gone missing here is still here, just shifted slightly out of phase with our reality. They become part of the infrastructure, you might say, rangers for all possible versions of the park. She stood up, moving to a window that faced Santa Elena Canyon, though it was too far away to actually see. But something changed recently. The barriers started weakening faster than usual. The missing hours became more frequent. Do you know what happened in 2012? The world was supposed to end according to the Mayan calendar? She laughed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. Not end. Shift. The Mayans understood that reality moves in cycles. 2012 was when we entered a new cycle, one where the barriers between worlds would become permeable. Big Bend, being a natural convergence point, is experiencing it first and strongest. So, the tall figure I saw, the one leading the procession, the Overseer. It's not one being, but a composite, every ranger who's ever been absorbed, all existing simultaneously in one form. Including you, Maria. What? She turned to look at me, and for a moment her eyes reflected too many colors. You went into Santa Elena Canyon after dark. Part of you never came out. That part is already working as a ranger in the between place, filing reports about intrusions from our reality into theirs. You're living parallel lives, and eventually, they'll converge. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. I'd been having dreams, vivid dreams where I patrolled a different Big Bend, one where the Rio Grande flowed uphill, where the desert bloomed with flowers that sang, where the night sky showed 2 moons. In those dreams, I wore the strange uniform with symbol patches, and I understood things that made no sense when I woke up. How do I stop it? I asked. You don't, Dr. Cray said simply. You can't stop geological processes, and this is essentially what this is, a geological process happening in dimensions we don't normally perceive. But you can influence it, guide it. Make sure that when the convergence completes, our version of reality isn't completely overwritten. She pulled out a map, hand-drawn on what looked like deerskin. There are 5 anchor points in Big Bend. Santa Elena Canyon is one. The others are the south rim of the Chisos, Mariscal Canyon, Boquitas Canyon, and here. She pointed to a spot in the desert I didn't recognize. The place the Spanish called El Punto de No Retorno, the point of no return. What's there? The original breach. The place where our reality first started bleeding into the others. It's been buried under centuries of sand and rock, but it's still there. Still active. If you want to understand what's really happening, you need to go there. But I warn you, everyone who's found it has joined the between place. No exceptions. Including you. She smiled that too perfect smile again. Who says I haven't? Who says this conversation isn't happening in the between place right now? Check your watch, Maria. I looked at my watch. It had stopped at 3:33 p.m. My phone was dead. The sun, which had been high overhead when I arrived, was now setting, painting the desert red. Hours had passed in what felt like minutes. The missing hours, I whispered, are never really missing, Dr. Cray finished. They're spent elsewhere, else when. You've been having conversations with me in multiple timelines simultaneously. In one, I'm warning you to stay away from the point of no return. In another, I'm giving you detailed instructions on how to find it. In a third, we're both already there, standing at the original breach, watching reality fold in on itself. My head was spinning. Which timeline is this? All of them, none of them. That's the point, Maria. Linear thinking is what's keeping you trapped. The moment you accept that all possibilities exist simultaneously, you'll understand how to navigate between them. She handed me a leather pouch containing what looked like ordinary rocks, but felt wrong to touch. Too heavy, too warm. Surfaces that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Anchors, she explained. Pieces of the original breach. They'll help you maintain consciousness during the transition, keep you from becoming completely absorbed like the others. Why are you helping me? Because in one timeline you save everyone. In another, you doom them all. I'm hedging my bets, trying to influence which possibility becomes dominant. She looked out the window again, and I saw her reflection multiply. Dozens of Dr. Crays, all slightly different, all looking back at me. Also, because you're my granddaughter. Will be my granddaughter. Were my granddaughter. Time is complicated when you're unstuck from it. Before I could process that, she pushed me toward the door. Go. The point of no return is 20 miles southeast of Santa Elena, where the old Comanche Trail crosses the Black Creek. You'll know it by the standing stones, rocks that shouldn't exist, arranged in patterns that hurt to perceive. Go at dawn on the summer solstice. That's when the barriers are thinnest. That's in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, 3 years, 3 seconds. It's all the same in the between place. You've already been there, Maria. You just need to remember it. I left her trailer in a daze, the anchor stones heavy in my pocket. The drive back to Panther Junction took either 20 minutes or 2 hours. My instruments couldn't agree. When I checked the visitor log the next day, there was no record of me leaving the station. According to the official timeline, I'd been doing paperwork all afternoon. But I had the stones, and I had the knowledge, and I had 3 weeks, or 3 years, or 3 seconds, to decide whether to go to the point of no return. The summer solstice was coming. The convergence was accelerating. And somewhere, in another timeline, I was already standing at the original breach, watching all possible versions of Big Bend collapse into one. The only question was, which version of me would make the choice that determined which reality survived. June 21st, 2019. Summer solstice. 4:47 a.m. The drive to the point of no return had taken me through parts of Big Bend most tourists never see, down dirt roads that weren't on any official map, past warning signs in English, Spanish, and symbols that predated both languages. My Park Service truck struggled over the rocky terrain, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness, illuminating Ocotillo and prickly pear that looked like grasping hands in the moving light. I wasn't following GPS anymore. The device had stopped working about 5 miles back, showing my location as simultaneously everywhere and nowhere in the park. Instead, I was following the pull of the anchor stones Dr. Cray had given me. They were so hot now I could feel them through my jacket pocket, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Or maybe my heartbeat was matching them. It was hard to tell where I ended and the stones began. 20 miles southeast of Santa Elena Canyon, where the old maps showed nothing but empty desert, I found them. The standing stones Dr. Cray had described were impossible to miss once you saw them, but also impossible to see until you were almost on top of them. They existed in a valley that shouldn't be there, a depression in the landscape that satellite images showed as flat ground. 13 stones, each one carved from material that hurt to look at directly. They weren't black or white or any color that existed in our spectrum. They were absence itself, like someone had cut holes in reality and forgotten to fill them with something else. When I tried to focus on one, my eyes would slide off, wanting to look anywhere else. But in my peripheral vision I could see them clearly, and they were covered in symbols that writhed and changed, telling stories in languages that predated human speech. I parked my truck at the edge of the valley and walked down on foot. The moment I crossed some invisible threshold, the temperature dropped 20 degrees, and I could hear my breath echoing in a space that should have been open air. The desert sounds, crickets, wind, the distant call of a great horned owl, cut off abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like pressure against my eardrums. I wasn't alone. 6 other figures were already there, standing at various points around the stone circle. As I got closer, I recognized them all. Tom Delgado was there, looking haggard, his uniform wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. Patricia Williams stood opposite him, her hand resting on her service weapon, eyes darting between the stones like she expected something to jump out at any moment. The other 4 were rangers I knew, but had never spoken to about the missing hours. David Brown from the Chisos Basin Station, Sarah Black from Rio Grande Village, Marcus Thompson from Persimmon Gap, and incredibly, James Rodriguez, who'd supposedly quit 3 years ago after a nervous breakdown. "You all got the dreams," I said. It wasn't a question. "Every night for the past month," Tom replied, his voice hoarse. "Dreams where I was already here had always been here. Dreams where I wore a uniform that didn't exist but made perfect sense. Dreams where I understood things that made me wake up screaming." "I tried not to come," Patricia added. "Took a week off, drove to Houston. But the dreams got worse the farther I got from the park. Physical pain, like something was tearing me apart from the inside. I had to come back." James Rodriguez, who I hadn't seen since his breakdown, looked different. Older, despite only 3 years passing. His hair was completely gray now, and his eyes had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. "I've been living in the desert," he said quietly. "In the places between places. Trying to understand what happened to me. The old-timers, the ones who've been taken and returned, they taught me things. Showed me the truth about Big Bend." "What truth?" David Brown asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected. "That it's not just a park. It's an intersection, a crossroads between every possible version of reality. The Chisos Mountains aren't mountains. They're dimensional anchors, holding multiple timelines in place. And Santa Elena Canyon, that's where the boundaries are weakest, where things bleed through." The sun was beginning to lighten the eastern horizon, though the stars were still visible overhead. As the first indirect light touched the standing stones, they began to resonate. Not with sound, but with something else. A vibration that I felt in my bones, in my DNA, in parts of myself I didn't know existed. "You're all here because you've been chosen," a voice said from everywhere and nowhere at once. The overseer materialized in the center of the circle, though materialized isn't quite right. It was more like reality adjusted to include something that had always been there but we hadn't been able to perceive. It stood at least 8 feet tall, wearing a uniform that kept shifting. Now modern Park Service, now Spanish colonial military, now something that might have been what the original inhabitants of this land wore before European contact, now something that wouldn't exist for another 1,000 years. Its face was the worst part. It had features, but they wouldn't stay still. One moment it looked like Tom, the next like a conquistador I'd seen in historical paintings, the next like something not quite human, with too many eyes and angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. But consistently, horrifyingly, I could see myself in it. A version of me that had already made the choice I was about to face. The convergence is accelerating beyond our calculations, the overseer continued, its voice a harmony of every ranger who'd ever served at Big Bend, past, present, and future. We've maintained the boundaries for centuries, kept the timeline separate enough for your reality to remain stable. But something has changed. The barriers aren't just weakening, they're inverting. Soon, instead of your reality being primary with others bleeding through, all realities will exist simultaneously in the same space. What does that mean for us? Sarah Black asked, her scientific training overcoming her fear. The overseer gestured, and the air shimmered. Suddenly, we could see it. Not just Big Bend as we knew it, but dozens, hundreds of Big Bends, all superimposed on each other. In one, the Rio Grande flowed backwards, up into the mountains. In another, the desert was a lush jungle, trees that shouldn't exist growing from soil that was simultaneously sand and loam and volcanic ash. In a third, the Chisos Mountains were made of glass, reflecting a sun that was the wrong color and too close to Earth. Imagine trying to exist in all of these simultaneously, the overseer said. Your minds would shatter in seconds. Your bodies would be torn apart by conflicting physical laws. Gravity might be stronger in one timeline, weaker in another. Oxygen might be poisonous in some, necessary in others. Time might flow forward, backward, sideways, or not at all. So we stop it, Marcus Thompson said, with the confidence of someone who'd never experienced the between place. You can't stop it. But you can guide it. One of you must enter the original breach, experience all timelines simultaneously, and choose which one becomes dominant. The others will fade to shadows, still existing but no longer interfering with the primary reality. The original breach? I asked, though the anchor stones in my pocket were already pulling me toward the center of the circle, where the sand was beginning to swirl in patterns that hurt to follow. Created in 1535 when the conquistador Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca drank from the spring that existed here. The spring didn't contain water. It contained the liquid boundary between realities. His consumption of it created the first bridge between timelines, the first point where multiple Big Bends tried to exist in the same space. We've been managing that breach ever since, recruiting those who stumble upon it to help maintain the boundaries. The swirling sand was forming a depression now, a funnel that led down to something that glowed with an anti-light that my eyes couldn't process. It was bright and dark simultaneously, colorful and colorless, beautiful and terrifying. Through it, I could hear voices, thousands of them, all the missing people from across the centuries, all speaking at once in a harmony that was almost music, but not quite, like a choir singing in mathematics instead of words. The summer solstice is the moment of maximum instability, the overseer continued. In approximately 6 minutes, at the exact moment of solstice, the convergence will reach critical mass. Without intervention, all timelines will collapse into chaos. Reality itself will become probabilistic rather than fixed. Every moment will contain all possible moments. Past, present, and future will exist simultaneously. Life, as you understand it, will become impossible. One of us has to go in, Tom said, understanding dawning on his weathered face. One of us has to choose which reality survives. Yes, but understand the cost. Whoever enters the breach will experience all timelines simultaneously. Even with the anchor stones Dr. Cray provided to Maria, the human mind isn't designed for that kind of perception. You'll be changed, fundamentally and irrevocably. Part of you will always exist in the between place, always be aware of the other possibilities. You'll never be fully human again, never fully belong to any one timeline. You'll become like us, a guardian of the boundaries, a ranger not just of Big Bend, but of reality itself. We looked at each other. 7 rangers who'd been drawn here by dreams and compulsions we didn't fully understand. The weight of the decision pressed down on us like the heat of a desert noon. Who would make the sacrifice? Who would give up their humanity to save everyone else's? "It has to be me," James Rodriguez said suddenly. "I'm already broken." The between place already took part of me 3 years ago. I see the other timelines even when I'm awake. I'm halfway there already. "No," I said, stepping forward. The anchor stones were burning through my pocket now, eager to return to their source. Dr. Cray gave these to me specifically. She said in the timeline where we succeed, I'm the one who goes into the breach. She's seen all the possibilities, exists in all of them simultaneously. If she says it has to be me, then it has to be me. "Maria, you don't understand what you're sacrificing," Patricia said, grabbing my arm. "You have a life, a family. I have a sister in El Paso who I see twice a year and parents who died 5 years ago," I interrupted. "I have this job, this park, these responsibilities, and now I have this choice. The between place has been calling to me since I first broke the rule and entered Santa Elena after dark. Part of me is already there, has always been there." I pulled out the anchor stones. In the growing light of dawn, they were pulsing with their own inner fire, resonating with the standing stones around us. They felt alive in my hands, warm like flesh, beating like hearts. "How do you know choosing our timeline is the right choice?" Marcus asked. "What if one of the other realities is better?" "Better for who?" I replied. "I've seen glimpses of them in dreams, realities where humanity never evolved, where it evolved differently, where the Spanish never came to Texas, where the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs missed. They might be better for someone, something, but not for the 7 billion people currently alive in our timeline. I'm not choosing the best reality. I'm choosing ours." The sun was almost at the horizon now. The moment of solstice was seconds away. The breach was widening, and through it, I could see wonders and horrors in equal measure. Cities made of living glass. Deserts that sang. Oceans in the sky. Humans with wings. Humans with scales. Humans that weren't human at all. "Maria," the overseer said, and for a moment, its face stabilized into something almost kindly, almost human. "Once you enter, you'll have only moments before the convergence completes. You must choose quickly, decisively. Doubt will scatter you across all timelines. You'll cease to exist as a singular being. I understand. No, you don't. But you will." I walked to the edge of the breach. The other rangers stepped back, giving me room, their faces mixtures of awe, fear, and gratitude. The funnel of swirling sand had become a portal now, a doorway to everywhere and every when. I looked back one last time at Big Bend as I knew it. The sun was just cresting the Chisos Mountains, painting them gold and red. The desert was waking up. I could hear a cactus wren calling, see a roadrunner darting between the stones. It was beautiful, dangerous, perfect in its imperfection. "Thank you," Tom said simply. I nodded, turned, and jumped into the breach. Falling through the convergence point was like experiencing every possible version of my life simultaneously. I was born in El Paso and Houston and Mexico City, and on a space station orbiting Earth, and in a timeline where Earth never existed. I was Maria Gonzalez and Maria Gonzalez and Mary Gonzalez and something unpronounceable that had evolved from silicon instead of carbon. The timelines spread out around me like a vast web. each thread a different possibility, a different choice, a different world. I could see them all with perfect clarity, understand them all with perfect comprehension. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying. My human mind should have shattered instantly, but the anchor stones were doing their job, keeping me coherent enough to make a choice. I saw the timeline where the Hollow people had won, where every human moved in perfect synchronization, their individuality sacrificed for a collective consciousness that spanned dimensions. It was peaceful in its way, but it wasn't human. I saw the timeline where the things from before humanity had reclaimed the earth, where the deserts bloomed with impossible life forms, and the cities were grown rather than built. It was beautiful, but we had no place in it. I saw the timeline where time itself had broken, where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. Cave painters worked alongside astronauts. Dinosaurs grazed next to shopping malls. It was chaos, magnificent chaos, but unsustainable. And I saw our timeline. Flawed, dangerous, often cruel, but ours. The Big Bend, where tourists came to see the sunset over the Chisos Mountains, not knowing they were looking at dimensional anchors. Where the Rio Grande carved its way through Santa Elena Canyon, following the laws of physics even if those laws occasionally bent. Where rangers like me spent our lives protecting something we only partially understood. I reached for it with my consciousness, with the anchor stones, with every part of my being that remembered being human. The stones dissolved in my hands, their substance spreading through the web of timelines like dye through water, highlighting our reality, strengthening it, making it dominant. The other timelines resisted. They had their own champions, their own versions of me arguing for their dominance. I saw myself as a conquistador, insisting that the timeline where Spain never fell was superior. I saw myself as something crystalline and beautiful, arguing for the reality where organic life had never developed. I saw myself as part of the Hollow people, explaining the peace that came from surrendering individuality. But I held firm. This was my choice, my timeline, my responsibility. The anchor stone's energy pulsed through the web, and gradually the other timelines began to fade. Not disappearing, that was impossible, but becoming secondary. Shadow worlds that would only be visible in dreams and missing hours. The process felt like seconds and centuries simultaneously. I experienced the birth and death of universes, the rise and fall of civilizations, every possible outcome of every possible choice. And through it all, I held on to the image of Big Bend as I knew it, used it as a lighthouse to guide me back to our reality. When I finally opened my eyes, though I wasn't sure I'd ever close them, I was lying in the sand next to the standing stones. But the stones were different now. They were crumbling, turning to ordinary limestone. Their purpose served, their power exhausted. The breach was gone, leaving only a small depression in the sand that was already filling in with the morning wind. But I could still see the shadows of other timelines if I looked for them. Ghost images of other Big Bends, other possibilities, overlaid on our reality like double exposures on old film. They were faint, ignorable if you didn't know what to look for, but they were there. They would always be there. Tom and Patricia were kneeling beside me, checking my pulse, their faces tight with concern. The other rangers stood in a protective circle, weapons drawn, though there was nothing left to guard against. The overseer was gone, or maybe it had never been there, or maybe it was there in a timeline we could no longer fully perceive. "Maria? Can you hear me?" Tom was saying, his voice sounding like it was coming through water. "I can hear everything," I replied, and my voice harmonized with itself, carrying echoes of other Marias and other timelines. Every possibility, every choice, every path not taken. Is it done? Patricia asked. Is our timeline safe? Safe is relative, I said, sitting up with their help. The world spun for a moment, not with vertigo, but with the sensation of feeling it rotate through space, orbit around the sun, spiral through the galaxy. But yes, it's dominant. The convergence is locked. Big Bend is stabilized. What about the missing hours? David Brown asked. Will they stop? I shook my head, though the gesture felt strange, like I was shaking heads in multiple dimensions. The breach is closed, but the scar tissue remains. Santa Elena Canyon will always be a thin place, where the boundaries between timelines are permeable. People will still occasionally slip between realities, experience missing hours, or gained hours, or hours that never existed. But it won't escalate. The wholesale convergence has been prevented. What about you? James Rodriguez asked, and I could see in his eyes that he understood what I'd become. He'd touched the between place, but I'd embraced it, merged with it, become part of it. I'm different, I admitted. I can see all the timelines, all the possibilities. I know that in another reality Tom made the choice instead of me, and he's the one lying here transformed. In another, we all went in together and became a collective consciousness. In another, we failed. And right now, the Earth is experiencing a reality storm that's rewriting the laws of physics every few seconds. Jesus, Marcus whispered. How do you live with that? Sarah asked, her scientific mind genuinely curious. How do you function knowing all possibilities simultaneously? I'm learning, I said. The anchor stones, even dissolved, are still part of me. They help me focus on this timeline, keep me grounded in this reality. But I'll never be fully human again. I'll always be partially in the between place, always aware of the infinite possibilities branching from every moment. We sat there in the desert as the sun rose fully, bathing Big Bend in the golden light of a West Texas morning. The park looked exactly as it always had, beautiful, harsh, unforgiving. But I could see through it now, see the dimensional anchors that were the Chisos Mountains, see the probability streams flowing through Santa Elena Canyon, see the ghost images of conquistadors and Comanche warriors and future beings that didn't yet exist, all walking the same trails. We should report this, Marcus said eventually. Report what? Tom asked. That we prevented a multidimensional convergence, that Maria sacrificed her humanity to keep reality from collapsing. They'll Section 8 all of us. So what do we say? Patricia asked. Nothing, I decided. We were investigating reports of vandalism at a Native American heritage site. We found evidence of teenage drinking. Case closed. The standing stones. What standing stones? Check the satellite imagery. There's nothing there. And there wasn't. When we looked later, satellite photos showed only empty desert where the stones had stood. Even our own memories of them were starting to fade, except for mine. I would always remember. I had to remember because remembering was part of my new job. We drove back to Panther Junction in 3 separate vehicles, maintaining radio silence. The others would eventually forget the details, remember it as a strange dream, a shared hallucination brought on by the desert heat and job stress. Only James Rodriguez would retain full memory, and he would disappear back into the desert, becoming one of the guardians Dr. Cray had mentioned, the ones who lived between civilization and the between place. But I had to return to my regular duties, had to pretend to be the same Ranger Maria Gonzalez who'd left for a vandalism investigation that morning. I filed reports, led tourist programs, responded to medical emergencies. Normal Ranger things. Except now, I did them while simultaneously aware of infinite other versions of myself doing infinite variations of the same tasks. That night, alone in my Ranger cabin, I had the dream. But it wasn't a dream anymore, it was a meeting. I was in the between place, the space that existed in all timelines simultaneously, and I wasn't alone. Dr. Elizabeth Cray was there, young and old and every age in between, all existing at once. "You did well," she said with voices that harmonized across decades. "You chose wisely." "Did I?" "How can you know this was the right choice?" "Because I can see all the timelines where you chose differently, and in most of them, humanity doesn't survive the next century. This timeline, flawed as it is, has the best chance of continuity, of growth, of eventually understanding what Big Bend really is and learning to work with it rather than against it. What happens now? Now, you do what rangers have always done. You protect the park. You just have a broader definition of park now. Big Bend isn't just 800,000 acres of desert and mountains. It's a multidimensional nexus, a crossroads between infinite possibilities. And you're its guardian. For how long? Time doesn't mean what you think it means. You've already been doing this job for centuries in some timelines. You've just started in others. You'll do it for exactly as long as you need to, until someone else is ready to take your place. And the missing hours will continue, but controlled. Managed. Instead of random breaches, there'll be pressure valves, letting off just enough interdimensional energy to keep the system stable. People will still occasionally slip between timelines, but they'll return. Changed, perhaps, but returned. Like the Hendersons? They're an interesting case. They exist in 17 different timelines simultaneously now. In most, they don't remember the experience. In a few, they do, and they've become quite accomplished interdimensional travelers. Their daughter, Madison, will grow up to be important. She has a natural ability to perceive multiple timelines. She might be your replacement, eventually. The dream meeting vision faded, and I woke up in my cabin, looking out at the Chisos Mountains as they glowed in the moonlight. They looked solid, real, permanent, but I could see through them now, see the dimensional mathematics that held them in place, see the probability streams flowing around them like wind. My phone rang. "Dispatch. Maria, we've got a report of strange lights in Santa Elena Canyon. Visitor says they saw people walking into the canyon walls." "On my way," I said, already reaching for my uniform. Because this was my job now. Not just protecting the park from ordinary dangers, but protecting reality from the extraordinary ones. Managing the missing hours. Maintaining the boundaries. Making sure that when tourists came to see the sunset over the desert, there was still a desert there to see. Still a sunset that followed the normal laws of physics. Still a reality they could return to. I drove through the night toward Santa Elena Canyon, the anchor stone's energy still pulsing through my transformed consciousness. In my rearview mirror, I could see ghost images of myself, hundreds of other Marias in other timelines, all driving toward their own versions of the canyon, all protecting their own realities. We were legion. We were singular. We were the thin line between order and chaos, between one reality and infinite realities. We were park rangers, and we had work to do. The rule still stood: never enter Santa Elena Canyon after dark. But now I knew the rule existed not to keep people out, but to keep realities in. To maintain the boundaries that allowed our world to exist as a coherent, consistent timeline rather than a probability storm of infinite possibilities. And I would enforce that rule, in this timeline and all the shadow timelines that existed alongside it, for as long as necessary. Because that's what rangers do. We protect the park, even when the park exists in more dimensions than most people can imagine. Even when protection means standing guard at the intersection of all possible realities. Even when the missing hours are never really missing, just spent maintaining the boundaries that keep our world whole. Big Bend National Park, 800,000 acres of desert and mountains, and infinite realities, all needing protection, all needing a ranger who could see them all needing me.